Greetings to you viewers from across the globe. You're welcome to the show Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. I'm your host, Odiawa AI, for Veegil Media. You'll do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Veegil Media, and follow us across various social media platforms. Download the app on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. On the show today, we will be talking about the majesty of democracy, and who is His Majesty we will be referring to here on the African continent. We're talking about footballer turned president, George Weah. But before we'll commence concerning that, we'll move on to the first phase of the show, which will be the headlines making the rounds in the political space. Now, plans to tarnish my image will fail. Now, this is according to Betty Edu. Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Betty Edu, has revealed that plans to tarnish her image will amount to nothing. The minister's comment is coming after a document recently emerged showing that she allegedly disbursed 585 million naira, which is actually 585,198,500 million naira, into a personal account. Now, the instruction for the payment is contained in a leaked letter dated December 20, 2023. In the letter signed by the minister and titled Mandate for Payment of Grants for Vulnerable Groups in Akwa Ibom, Cross River, Lagos, and Ogun States, respectively, Betty Edu instructed the Accountant General of the Federation to transfer the said sum of the above figure to the UBA account of one Onielu Bridget Mojishola. Now, despite the public outcry, Betty Edu denied any wrongdoings. Now, according to the viral document signed by Betty Edu and directed to the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, the minister instructed that the disbursement of such figure to a private account. Now, the document also showed that the payment of the said sum grant was meant for vulnerable groups in Akwa Ibom, Cross River, Ogun State, and Lagos State. Now, we're yet to know why this disbursement actually took place, and we'll follow up with that. Now, still on Betty Edu, Tinubu orders probe of Betty Edu's ministry and vows to also take action. President Bola Tinubu has ordered a thorough probe of the Ministry of the Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation led by Betty Edu, the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris. He actually made this known in a statement on Sunday. Now, controversy had enveloped Betty Edu's alleged involvement of the approval of the figure which we mentioned earlier on 585.198 million to be disbursed into a personal account in a letter which was allegedly signed by the humanitarian minister. She allegedly instructed the Accountant General of the Federation, Oluwatoyin Madeyin, to transfer the said sum to one Onielu Bridget as a grant for vulnerable groups in 4 states, which I had mentioned earlier on the first headlines. However, Madeyin explained that although her office received a request from the humanitarian ministry to make certain payments, her office did not act on it. Now, Betty Edu, who is actually 37, the youngest minister in the president's cabinet, subsequently said that there were plans to tarnish her image, adding that she won't embezzle government funds. Now, incidentally, the EFCC is presently probing Edu's predecessor, Sadiya Farouk, over alleged laundering of 37.1 billion naira during her tenure as a minister of the administration of the Muhammad Buhari administration. The information minister said Nigerians would be informed on the progress of the investigation subsequently. Now, away from Betty Edu matters, it's on to PDP and the G5 governors. We have nowhere to go, Oppong says. This is PDP, the G5 governors, who are actually backing Tinubu in 2027. Now, former governor of Benue State, Samuel Oppong, says the G5 group within the PDP will support President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's re-election in 2027. Oppong made this known on Sunday at a luncheon hosted by the Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, in Port Harcourt, the Rivers State capital. Wike, an ex-governor of Rivers, donned a black t-shirt and a butter-colored jacket and was flanked by Oppong and other G5 members, Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi of Enugu, just to mention a few. Now, the G5, a group of 5 governors within the PDP, rejected Atiku Abubakar as the party's presidential candidate before the 2023 polls as at February last year. The G5 backed a southern candidate in the person of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The G5 include Oppong, Wike, Agwanyi, Okezie-Ikpeazu, and Seyi Makinde. All the group members finished their second term of 8 years as governor last May, except Makinde, who is now in his second term currently. Now, addressing the gathering crowded with Wike's allies on Sunday, Oppong said the G5 has no regret for backing Tinubu's victory in the last polls, declaring that the group will again back the ex-Lagos State governor for his second term in office in Nigeria's presidential run. I'm Odiawa AI for Veegil Media, and the show is Viewpoint. Join me in the next phase of the show. You're welcome back to the show. I'm Odiawa AI for Veegil Media, and the show is Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. You'll do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us across various social media platforms. Don't forget to download the app on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. On the show today, we'll be talking about His Royal Highness, or the Majesty in democracy on the African continent, and by that I mean former footballer turned politician and president who has actually stepped down for the new dispensation in Liberia. I'm talking about George Weah. Now, leadership shortages and loss of democratic certifications resound loudest across the African political scene in 2023, which has just, gone by. Citizens' pushback on parlous administrative structures gave rise to coup attempts, coups and counter-coups in more francophone nations. In others, surviving vote-based system became flawed down to the ballot papers to worsen tension. But in any case, be that as it may, and with the eventual fate of good governance at the crossroads, Africa saw an encouraging sign in selfless leadership and ethical for the new generation of not just Africa, but Nigeria, here to be specific, who happen to produce leaders to be or want to be leaders. Now, to George Oppong of Liberia belongs the narrative of human highs, let me put it that way, and human lows in personal and political accomplishments, but without compromise in dignity and also grace. Moving on. Now, it was not an auspicious time for politicians to test their popularity, while wealthy economies in the global north and got well there, let me put it that way, and their poor counterparts, developing counterparts in Africa, actually got poorer in 2023. Now, this was actually made worsened by crisis, overheating war economies and global economic realities, which were actually biting harder by the second or by the minute or by the hour. Now, the perfect storm of woes threatened to capsize feeble economies in the global south. Already, high inflation's headwinds got more turbulent, debt burden also on the other side, and fiscal crisis actually worsened. Famished citizens became despondent as millions crossed the poverty line in seconds. The backlash is on hapless leaders in democracy or democratic Africa, let me put it that way, and even in nations that cannot even afford the luxury of democracy. Now, evidently, the sweeping whirlwind, or should I call it tsunami, of military incursions in the Central and West African regions gained more grounds in 2023 in the name of coups in Gabon, Niger Republic. Now, this brought the tally of despotic regimes to 9 in 3 years. More nations and episodes of failed coup attempts within a year. Now, for nations holding on to democracy but by the thread, elections and the nemesis of underperformance had dire consequences for sitting leaders. The easy strategy became a sit tight or manipulate the rule books, which is actually the constitution, to make only oneself eligible in pseudo-democracy. Also, not forgetting terrorizing opponents and conduct shabby elections to sanction perpetrated stay in power. In other democracies, Nigeria for instance, free and fair elections became a rarity and no assurance even for the most qualified candidates. The smartest in the manipulation actually will carry the day. Such was the general mood in the race for the general elections in Liberia, just after the sister West African nations such as Sierra Leone had their own rowdy polls. Now, ex-soccer superstar turned president George Weah and his ruling party had their work cut in the run-up to the October presidential election as of 2023. Clearly, his government had failed to deliver Christmas on the streets of Monrovia and beyond, and for a people most amenable to new gambles, only a slanted electoral process was actually guaranteed to edge a second term in George Weah's favor. But George Weah opted for a different path actually. Superintending a sham election for another 6-year tenure was not even in his agenda. He told his party men and supporters he was never scared of being substituted in the middle of the game. Now, he is speaking from the soccer perspective. Now, in a manner that shocked many, President Weah did not wait for the umpire's final call of the votes in the November 17 runoff elections before he called to congratulate the leader of the opposition, a 78-year-old Joseph Boakai. His concession stood out as a dampener to the wave of political instability that has significantly eroded faith in democratic elections in West and Central Africa as we speak. And in a year where finding such exemplarity in governance and public life is rare, George Weah runs solo in a democratic sportsmanship to emerge the MVP, the most valuable politician now, not the most valuable player now, on the continental political scene. Born October 1, 1966, full names George Mane Oppong Weah, had in a football stellar career which actually began in his native land, Liberia, starting from the dusty streets of Monrovia. He transited to a sterling professional career in neighboring Cameroon, France, Italy, and also England, becoming the first African footballer to win both FIFA's World Player of the Year trophy and the Ballon d'Or in 1995. The top striker had 75 caps for his country, captained, coached, and personally funded the national team in his prolific 18-year run for the form that ended in 2003. Now, in 1989 and 1995, he was named the African Footballer of the Year, winning the official award twice. And in 1996, he was rewarded with the African Player of the Century. He is regarded as one of the best world players and greatest African players never have played at the FIFA World Cup. Now, this is according to Scott Murray. Now, Weah's global fame indeed dwarfed that of his home country. Now, what do I mean by that? Well known globally, but locally he wasn't really recognized. Liberia, the oldest African republic created for the settlement of freed African and Caribbean slaves, is a small country of about 5 million people. It is also one of the poorest nations in the world, having a GDP of $4 billion, a high dependence on agricultural exports, and more than a fifth of the population living on less than $2.15 a day. Crises have caused 2 civil wars in Liberia from 1989 to 1997, and also from 1999 to 2003. In the last 3.5 decades, in both, about 250,000 persons were killed and more than 1 million displaced in what have been referred to as Africa's bloodiest conflict. To compound her spell of doom, the devastating Ebola pandemic further shattered the small African nation. Apparently concerned about the socio-political and economic situation of Liberia, Weah set aside his post-soccer life of comfort in New York to actually delve into the political space at home. Now, leveraging his football popularity, actually capitalizing on it, he formed the Congress for Democratic Change Party in order to have a chance at the country's reset from the top. Local politics turned out to be a different breed of animal, let me put it that way, from global soccer stardom. His star power spells on youths proved inadequate for presidency as at 2005. He actually lost the second round of the votes to Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who is now Africa's first elected female head of state. A major talking point in the electioneering campaign was Weah's lack of credentials in politics. Years of adept management of games and transmission of touchline game plan to ball striking prowess rarely qualify one for leadership positions of an ethnically diverse, fragile nation. Weah took the criticism in good faith and returned to school. When I mean school here, I'm talking about the political school, to actually know the game plan, because the soccer school is different from the political school. Now, in 2011 election, he still ran unsuccessfully for vice president alongside Winston Tubman. Now, to get into the fray, Weah in 2014 contested and got election in the Senate of Liberia for the Monserrado County. In 2017, actually, I beg your pardon, it offered another free kick to fire another shot for the highest office in the land, Liberia, I mean. Now, this time he was on target, beating the incumbent Vice President Joseph Boakai. President Weah was sworn in on January 22nd, 2018. Now, 6 years down the line was a rematch with Boakai, whom he defeated by a wide margin at 2017. Now, the stake had, however, become higher. The 2023 election was a referendum on Weah's stewardship and his promise to lift the poorest out of their misery. Now, of course, many Liberians have since grown disillusioned with the lack of progress in the last few years, including his failure to establish a war crimes court for the country. The general complaints are the same: seething poverty, high unemployment, food insecurity, poor electricity supply, and widespread despondency. Now, this is a prevailing feature all over West Africa. Now, apparently frustrated, the people wanted to try a new hand, and Boakai, who is 78, came in handy. And I asked the question, why are we so dependent on the gray hair who is actually meant to advise the black hair to rule the government? I thought gray hair is synonymous with wisdom, not obstinacy. Now, but grafts and drugs were also on the election ballots, with the opposition Unity Party robbing them in Weah's administration. On grafts, Weah's first refused to publicly declare his assets, which is what any public office holder should do. Now, despite doing so in 2005 when he first ran for office, this time around his officials followed suit, ignoring the mandate to declare theirs. Now, just 9 months into the presidency, the Liberian press was awash with the alleged 15.5 billion Liberian dollars banknote scandal, approximately 5% of the country's GDP. In another instance, 3 senior government officials, including Weah's ally, Nathaniel McGill, were sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department for allegedly engaging in public corruption. Weah actually denied having any knowledge of the affair and suspended all 3 after the sanctions were imposed. There were no prosecutions either. After 4 national auditors died in just over a week in 2020, public mistrust of the Weah's administration over corruption actually heightened. Now, at one point last year, 2023, the president scored another threatening, should I say, own goal in his political career, as he was away for most of the time for 50 days on a trip that included stops in Qatar to watch his son play in the U.S. national team during the World Cup, as well as summits in Morocco and Washington. Now, these pitfalls, coupled with deep-seated ethnic fault lines, had influenced the voting pattern Weah and his ruling party had their back against the wall in a free and fair electoral process. Now, in the first round of voting in October, Boakai emerged neck-to-neck with Weah, but below the 50% needed to secure an outright victory, necessitating a runoff. Now, almost a month later, the 78-year-old Boakai, who has actually been nicknamed Sleepy Joe, known for dozing off at public events during the time as vice president, pulled off a stunning comeback, defeating the 57-year-old Weah. Now, Weah's concession now is what I want to talk about. It has actually paved way for Liberia's second democratic transfer of power in over 7 decades, peacefully. The first was when Weah swept to power 6 years ago. What am I driving at? Despite the foibles of his administration, the symbolism of the incumbent president showing exemplary sportsmanship at the time of waning democracy on the continent is quite significant. He was faced with tough choice at the time. It was most unpopular for a sitting president to just cave in without a fight and just relinquish power just like that. Liberia's neighbor, Sierra Leone, was boiling after an attempted coup that forced the government of President Julius Maada Bio to impose a nationwide curfew. Now, since the beginning of last year, countries like Gabon, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Burkina Faso, Niger, Sao Tome and Principe have all witnessed failed coup attempts and successful coups. The odd motivations notwithstanding, Weah took the path of honor, I beg your pardon, diffused the tension, and salvaged a fragile nation from another round of devastating crisis. Now, quite notably in an amusing manner, All it would have required Weah to stay in power was for him to use the familiar playbook by denouncing the election, alter the constitution, sack some people in high places as a warning, or just improvise any means necessary to undermine the election. That's the typical African characteristics of continuing your stay in power. And he will be sitting pretty cool, calling the shots and daring even global powers to remonstrate, knowing he was never the first and may not be the last either. If he had chosen this path, there is little evidence that continental body, the AU, African Union, or the regional bloc, ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, would have lost sleep, but Weah remains committed to democratic values or ideals. Liberia, courtesy of President Weah's revolutionary spirit, is therefore the latest assurance that democracy can still work in African states despite the current pushbacks. On one hand, now in comparison, there is very little for comparison between Nigeria of over 200 million people and Liberia's 5.2 million people. Nonetheless, the remarkable leadership of President Weah is surrendering personal ambitions for national interests and fidelity to democratic values are lessons in leadership for flawed democracies such as Nigeria and other democratic nations. Weah won another laurel for belonging to the elite class of continental peacemakers and true democrats that the likes of Nigeria's Goodluck Jonathan that also conceded defeat in 2015. Now, these Democrats conclusively have reiterated that violence or military takeovers of power is not the best mode of transition. Rather, free and fair elections, the people's ballots, and governments through constitutional means remains actually the best, irrespective of who wins on election day. They have shown the current political class that political mandate belongs only to the electorate and not the godfathers, the money bags who are actually the bourgeoisies, or the tribunals, or the courts. I'm Odiawa AI for Veegil Media, and the show has been Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. You do well to subscribe to this channel, Veegil Media, and follow us across various social media platforms. Don't forget to download the app on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Thanks for watching.